Hello and welcome to this week's installment of the Developer Skill Sprint series, focusing on powerful database access with FireDAC and InterBase. My name is Brian Alexakis, and I am a Product Marketing Manager here at Embarcadero Technologies. We are now on the 5th week of this ongoing Skill Sprint series. Last week, we covered the all-new language and RTL features. Next week, we will examine how to build scalable multi-tier solutions with EMS and DataSnap. If you have missed any of the Skill Sprint series or are looking for any of the resources, whether it be notes, source code for the projects, or the video replays, you can find links to them on my blog at embt.co/blog-com-brian. All of the Skill Sprint replays are added to our YouTube playlist at embt.co/skill-sprints-YouTube. FireDAC. What exactly is FireDAC? Well, FireDAC is a unique set of universal data access components for developing multi-device database applications for Delphi, C++ Builder, and RAD Studio XC7. With its powerful common architecture, FireDAC enables native, high-speed, direct access from Delphi to InterBase, SQLite, MySQL, SQL Server, Oracle, PostgreSQL, IBM DB2, SQL Anywhere, Access, Firebird, Informix, and more. FireDAC does not require any extra drivers to use, although you still will need to include drivers for the database that you connect to. And the full source code for FireDAC is also provided. If your app is using the old Borland Database Engine, a BDE, and would like to migrate to FireDAC, you can use the Refind utility. I've linked here on the screen steps to a doc wiki that will take you through the process of migrating a BDE app to use FireDAC. The Refind utility is a search and replace utility that uses Perl regular expressions to update and migrate a BDE application to use FireDAC components. If you also would like to get some general information about how to use FireDAC, you can visit the doc wiki at embt.co/FireDAC. Here we have a graphical overview of the FireDAC architecture. FireDAC has a loosely coupled multi-layered architecture where layers provide services. Both visual and non-visual components are shown. Physical link to the native drivers for each of the native SQL databases or local database that you might want to access, which includes InterBase, as well as InterBase to go and InterBase Lite, which is now available for use with Windows. There is also bridging drivers through the physical link to go through ODBC drivers to other databases, and also if you have DB Express or DB Express drivers, there is a bridging driver physical link for using that as well. The bottom layer shows the client software for each database you want to talk to, either locally or remotely. If you'd like to get more information on the overview of the FireDAC architecture, I've created a link here, and you can visit embt.co/FireDAC-ARCH. FireDAC encapsulates all database server-specific implementation of the ArrayDML commands and lets you use identical code for all server types. The resulting performance will differ based on the server implementation. Mainly Oracle, Microsoft SQL Server, and IBM DB2 have very powerful support of the ArrayDML, and the resulting performance increase is noticeable. If you would like to get some more information on how to use the array DML command with FireDAC, you can visit embt.co/array DML. The Data Explorer is a tabbed pane that is located along with the Project Manager and Model View tabs in the upper right corner of the IDE window. It adds new connections, modifies, deletes, and renames your connections. The Data Explorer works for databases that use DB-Express or FireDAC connection types. The Data Explorer lets you browse database server-specific schema objects, including tables, fields, stored procedure definitions, stored functions, triggers, and indexes. FireDAC databases also display primary keys, foreign keys, and generators. If you would like some more information on how to use the Data Explorer, you can visit embt.co/data-explorer. TFD memtable has new design time enhancements that allow you to load from file, save to file, and assign data. If you'd like some more information about the memtable, go ahead and visit embt.co/memtable-ex. The local SQL feature allows executing SQL commands where the T dataset descendants are used instead of the DB tables. One example application of local SQL is using it for heterogeneous queries. Those are queryable datasets that have result sets from different databases. If you would like some code examples of using a heterogeneous query, you can visit embt.co/local-SQL. InterBase is a proprietary database from Embarcadero Technologies. It is full ANSI SQL 92. It allows you to easily embed databases that are highly scalable, encryptable, and take advantage of multi-core systems. InterBase Server, InterBase Desktop, and IB Lite all work on Windows. IB Lite is royalty-free. It has a few limitations, however, that being it can only have one transaction active at a time, with a file size to the database limited to 100 megabytes. With VCL, you can use IB Lite and FireDAC to access databases on local machines. And when you're ready to upgrade to either server or desktop to remove the limitations of IB Lite, you can just simply swap out the key and you are ready to go. Stephen Ball did a great overview of IB Lite in our Code Rage 9 series. You can find that replay at embt.co/iblight-embed-data. For a demo on FireDAC, I am going to turn the presentation over to Paweł Glowacki and Stephen Ball.
I'm going to start a new VCL Forms application. I'm going to save it. So this is going to be the only application that I'm creating from scratch. I'm going to use some pre-built applications later on. So I'm going to put it into the FireDAC 101 application. And I'm going to just with making the connection. So the first and probably most important component in the list of the FireDAC components is the FireDAC connection. So this component represents a connection to the database, is similar in function to T-SQL connections from DB-Express or T-database from BDE. And if you double-click this component, you will see a nice editor that lets you connect to the different databases. So you can specify which database driver that you want. So we support different databases like InterBase, like SQL Server, Oracle, and similar. But I'm going to use InterBase. This is our own de facto standard enterprise database solution that is part of the XE5. So you need to point it to some place where you have some database files. So I have a number of database files here, like employee GDB. You can specify the username, sysdba, password as master key, and I should be able to, in this moment, try if I can connect to this database. So I can connect to this database, click on OK, and it's always a good idea to put a login prompt to false. Okay, so I have already a connection. So one of my favorite components in BDE architecture was T-table, and we have a similar component in FireDAC. So notice that when I added to the form, it is automatically connected through the connection property with the first connection component that is on the form. So this is faster. You don't have to make this another option. And then you can have a table name, any table from the underlying database. And now, guess what? I'm going to add a T data source component to the form and make sure that it's connected to the data set. And I'm going to add a T checkbox as well that will be controlling if my connection is open or not. And I'm going to add a TDB grid component to the form as well. Okay, I'm going to hook this DB grid component to the data source, and I should see data. So table needs to be active, and I can see data at design time. So this is very straightforward. We've been doing this for many years. If we've been with Delphi or C++ Builder long enough. So I'm going to add this beautiful navigator here as well. So hook it to the data source as well. Okay, so at this very moment, in the typical BDE world, I would be done. So now I'm going to run this application and see if it's running. Okay, I have a problem. So that's something that I was expecting. So that's the reason I'm actually showing you this. So probably if you start the very first time, you will get the similar error. FireDAC is very nice. It provides a very meaningful error messages, so you can, from the description, you can find out what's wrong. So basically what's missing on my form is a physical driver component. So in the FireDAC links category, you can see different components with names starting with TFD-FIS, and you can quickly find out which driver you want. So basically, for every database you want to connect to, you need to have this physical driver component. So in this way, you compile into your application the driver, and you don't need to deploy any additional files, like for example DLL in a DB Express architecture. So I know that the next error I would get would be missing weight cursor component, so I just add it. So these are the two components that needs to be there for every FireDAC application, so the weight cursor and the appropriate IB driver link components. In fact, you don't really need the components themselves. It's more about the units that are added to the users clause that needs to be in place. So now if I save this application and run it, I have now fully functional application. Okay, I have not added the code to this guy. On click event and FD table 1 active should be the same as checkbox 1 checked. So now I can really do it better. Okay, so I start with the inactive and then I can start activating it. Okay, so now it's more functional. Okay, so let's have a look into the tools that come with the FireDAC. So we have in the tools menu FireDAC Explorer and FireDAC Monitor. FireDAC Explorer is a handy, it's an equivalent of a similar tool from the BDE world, where you have when you can define connections to different databases and use it through a table component. Here you can also define connections to supported databases, so you can in a very handy way you can preview those connections. Master key. So you can see that what are the tables, what is the data inside of these tables, what is the metadata. You can create a new connection. So whatever you configure here will be available inside of your users public documents, RAD Studio, FireDAC. There are FD connection definitions. So this is the file that is actually maintained by this tool. So in this way, if you use connection that is actually defined inside of the ini file, you don't need to hard code the actual location of a database itself. So I can go here again, and instead of specifying the path to the database, I can select one of the connections, for example, my employee database, and this should work as well. So if I just move the employee database file to some different location and I just update the ini file, the application will continue to work. It's also possible to provide all information through the params property. So you can actually see that this is my connection definition employee. I could actually, if I go back to setting the path, all the information will be stored there. So instead of building connection at design time, I could have actually created at runtime and provide all the parameters on the fly. Also, it's possible to execute arbitrary SQL statements against the connected database. So employee, I can just run some queries. I can update data, do different things. I can also see all the information about the connection. So this is part of the tracing functionality, and you can very quickly find out which driver is used, which version of FireDAC we are using, what is the protocol, all very useful debugging information. There is also whole option system. This is very powerful feature of FireDAC that you can control how FireDAC works through a number of almost 100 different options for how the data is formatted, how data is fetched, what are the options for updating, what are the resource options. So this is here very handy. You can change, for example, data mapping rules. So you can, for example, specify which persistent field types of fields should be added to the data sets. So you have a consistent mapping across different database backends. And you can do all different things here. For example, I can specify how my data is fetched. So these options are also available through the object inspector. So you don't have to actually go through the editor. You have format option, fetch options. Also, what is interesting, the options are inherited through all connected components. So we can imagine a situation when I have one connection component and a number of dataset components connected to this connection. So if I change options at the level of the connection, they are propagated automatically to all connected datasets. And locally, at the level of the individual dataset, I can override individual settings that were inherited from the connection component. So this is a very powerful option of FireDAC. Okay, let me jump to my demos and just walk you through some of the selected functionality. So you have here my previous demo, but I'm going to switch into the monitoring demo. So there is a possibility to easily see through this second tool, FireDAC Monitor, the traffic that is happening between your application and the database we are connecting to. So first of all, on the connection component, if I double click, there is a property called remote. So monitor by, and you can specify that it is monitored, and you can send log information to the file, but you can also send it to the remote tool like this FireDAC monitor. Also, you need to add to the form this fdmoney remote client link and set its tracing property to true for this to work. So we are using TCP/IP protocol to trace information between the database and our application. So if I just start the application, I should see that something is happening. So I can see that client has started. If I click on connect, I see so much more information, including the transaction has been created, what protocol we are using, which commands are being sent to the database. You can even see the actual data that was sent to the application. So in this way, FireDAC is very friendly for really tracing, for debugging, for understanding what's happening between your application and the database. So in this way, we can quickly see all the problems, also including the fact that FireDAC comes with the all Delphi source code, so you can really understand how it works internally. Okay, monitoring is very important and powerful feature. Let me show you another example of how powerful is FireDAC. Example of cached updates. So that's something we know from the BDE.
Here about the GUI wait cursor and why you need it. One of the quite nice features around this is that I quite often had, when you've got long-running SQL processes running, you quite often want to change the screen cursor and then change it back at the end of it. Well, with FireDAC, you can just forget about ever having to write that code again, because the GUI wait cursor picks up when you've got a long-running transaction and will process that automatically for you. So that's why that component exists, and you just need one of them in your application. Okay.
Yeah, that's correct. Actually, for me, it's kind of unexpected to have this need to have this wait cursor, but this is how the FireDAC is currently architected. So you just need to get used to the fact that it has to be there. Okay, so let me go to the next FireDAC feature, cached updates. So this is really when in the previous example, when I was actually browsing through data through the DB grid, the query component would actually communicate with the database whenever it feels like it. So for example, fetching more packets with data. Sometimes it's not a functionality that we want, when maybe we want exactly to know when we commit, when we send updates and we cancel updates. So in this demo code that I have here, we are using actually a query with a cached updates property set to true. So in this way, I tell the query to actually use cached updates mode. And I also have this filter changes set that let me actually show visually all records that are actually stored inside of the query component. So I can also see these records that has been deleted and just waiting to send this information to the database. Also, there is some drawing code so I can see which components are which. So inserted are green, modify and deleted are red. So if it's deleted, it will have the nice horizontal line. Okay, let me run this application. So I can click on connect and I can do changes to my application. I can change this Glen to something else. So see, it has changed, but this change has not been yet sent to the database. I can add a component. So, and this will be hello, something, whatever. So this is a new component. I can take one of those records and delete it. So these changes are not yet sent to the database. I can click on cancel updates and all changes will be locally deleted. If I want to change something permanently, I can just click on commit updates, and in this way I can control that my updates are being sent directly to the database. So this is very, very powerful feature of FireDAC, possibility to work with cached updates.
Okay, here we have the resources for this week's skill sprint. I will be posting these links and more to my blog at embt.co/blog-com-brian. There you will also find the previous blog notes for the other skill sprints that we've done for modernizing VCL applications with RadStudio XE7. This week's project files can be found directly at embt.co/vcl-week-5-files. I've included a link to a series of videos related to InterBase and FireDAC, as well as all of the DocWiki articles that I mentioned in today's presentation. I want to thank you for joining us this week, and I will now turn the discussion over to question and answer.
In DB Express and Oracle 11G, all integers are represented as TFD field. Is FireDAC representing integers there as integers or BCD? And I'll tell you right now, off the top of my head, I really don't know that one. So we'll add that one to the blog notes for sure. Okay, the next one is if I try Wizard, I get mostly an error message that's not implemented, Oracle at least. Any plans to have it work? So I don't know what error is happening here. But Oracle definitely is supported, so it makes me think that maybe the Oracle client is not installed. Maybe that's the error.
Here, I'm going to put my email address in here for you, and if you want to contact me directly, I can do some research for you and get you some help.
As we're going through these questions, I'll note that our news groups are actually answered by the FireDAC chief architect. That's Dimitri. Can't remember how to say Dimitri's last name, REF or something like that. And so I highly recommend our news groups. He answers questions like he's like the one that writes the code. He answers messages every day. So you'll see me hanging out there sometimes too. Okay, next one. We converted our server-side data stack services to use FireDAC and replace DB Express. In the future, will there be a client-side FireDAC component to replace T-client dataset that allows apply updates type of update? Well, usually we can't talk about what's happening in the future, but Brian is going to do some internal research and see if there's anything we can say about what might be happening in the future. Okay, next. Okay, I think we covered this. This was any examples how to use stored procedures in a database from FireDAC, and we talked about how there is a TFD FireDAC component. Okay, Brian's going to talk about that. I'm going to write the answer. That should get you started.
Yeah, we'll be sure to add more links as well for this to the blog notes.
Okay. Okay. Next one is any examples on using views and triggers via FireDAC. Well, let's see. Well, if using a view would really just be the same thing as using a query. Typically, I would actually use a TFD query. You could also use a TFD table for doing that. For triggers, now triggers are stored on the server. So usually the trigger usually just happens. So that doesn't seem like a FireDAC thing to me. Okay, next one. Okay, client. So Alf must be talking about how the client is available. Alf, maybe you can tell us what error you're getting when you use Oracle, and maybe we can get some more information on that. Okay, next one. Will refine convert InterBase stored procedures with IBproc with FD stored proc? Well, yeah, I would expect so. So what you're talking about is you're converting procedures. So I'm assuming, well, what refine is doing is that's converting from like BDE to FireDAC. That's usually what using refine is about. And sure, if you want to do that type of conversion, I'm assuming that's what you're talking about, Alan. That should be fine. Okay, next question. Really like FireDAC. Does not need a DLL driver. Great design on that. Great. Thanks for your comments, Alan Wayne. Glad you like it. Okay, so Alf added on not implemented. So let's see, mostly get an error that it's not implemented. Yeah, I don't know what operation you're doing about that. I think probably the best way to go is to use our news groups and have maybe an interaction there with Dimitri and tell us exactly what you're doing.
Yeah, and please do email me about this. I posted you my email address there, and I'll be sure to find you some help directly on that. Okay, well, I'll leave the forum open for a few more moments if anybody else has any questions for us. In the meantime, I'd like to remind everybody that next week... Hey, what are we doing? That next week we're going to be covering scalable multi-tier solutions with EMS and DataSnap. Well, I'll leave it open for a few more moments, but I think we're pretty much winding down at this point. I thank you all for joining us this week, and we look forward to seeing you next week.